Hello and welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Please subscribe to the channel and share your stories with us. Story 1. I was with my boyfriend at the time waiting for a bus on a really long main road. As we were waiting, I happened to see an old lady walking in our direction from ages away. Something about her really caught my attention. She was small and old, but was hobbling towards us so quickly and with what seemed such purpose. I don't know why, but I just felt like she was looking straight at me even though she was kind of far away. As she got closer, I noticed she was indeed looking at me with a warm smile on her face, slightly out of breath, just full on staring at me. She crossed the road and walked straight up to me, as if she had known me for a lifetime. She put her arms on my shoulders and told me, "You are the sole proprietor of your own body." She just stood there smiling at me. She seemed relieved, as if she made it just in time to give me this message. It wasn't creepy at all, just a bit confusing, and so I asked her to explain what she meant. She simply said, "Nobody can touch you if you don't let them, my dear. It is your body. Nobody can put their hands on you if you don't allow it." And just like that, she left. Literally, that same day was the first time my ex was physically violent with me. This always stuck with me. Not saying she was an angel or something, maybe just a really batshit crazy lady with good timing, but just something I never forgot. Story 2. I was driving through East Pennsylvania, and I'm giving this girl I had just met at a friend's house that night a ride back to her place. Now, getting to her house involves going down a one-lane road that I had driven on at least 100 times prior to this. At one section, the road meanders around a ridge by making a big right turn, then it does a sharp turn left after a couple hundred yards, and then right again where these two logs laying on the side of the road make a kind of X shape on the ground. Very distinctive landmark, at least for me. This is the way this road has always been. So there we are, trying to find topics to talk about to keep the car ride from becoming awkward, since we hardly know each other. We take a right turn round the bend, then a sharp left turn, and then there's a left turn up ahead. Immediately my body goes into fight or flight mode. I remember thinking, this isn't right. I know there's a right turn here. This is not what is supposed to be here. We both fell dead silent and just looked ahead in confusion. The road about 100 yards in front of me just turned left and disappeared off into the woods. To the right there was nothing, just the side of a hill and some trees. It looked completely natural, not like a mirage or anything, yet it felt so strange and almost intentionally deceptive. None of this made sense. I knew these roads. As we approached the turn, I decided that I'm not going down that road. Something bad was down that road, so I just made the irrational decision to turn right instead and hope for the best. The girl in the car put her hands on the dashboard to brace for impact. My eyes were still fixated down the left-turning road as I started steering to my right, and then as my gaze shifted towards the direction I was now driving in, suddenly I could see the correct road in front of me again. Everything was back to normal. I looked in the rear-view mirror, and sure enough, the left-turning road was non-existent. My hands felt icy cold, and I was physically shaking. I pulled over to my right and just sat there in silence. We contemplated going back to investigate, but just looking at the road behind me gave me a sick feeling in my stomach. She felt it too. We decided to get the hell out of there, and that was that. I was very hesitant to go down that road again, and avoided it the best I could after that, but a few weeks or months later I decided to go back in the daytime and check it out. I pulled over at the right turn spot, got out of my car, and walked around the area. This is the part that really freaks me out. I quickly found out that on the left side of the road, obscured by some thick underbrush, was a very steep, rocky cliff that dropped off maybe 200 to 250 feet into a ravine. The phantom road would have taken me directly through a clearing in between two trees that lead straight over the cliff. If I had chosen not to follow my gut and drove down that road, there's a very, very good chance that we would have been seriously injured or killed. Apparently several people have crashed in that area by driving down into the ravine. Might just be coincidence, by who knows. I don't know what to make of this event. If I were alone, I'd be more willing to write it off as a hallucination or trick of the eye, but I wasn't alone. She saw the same thing I did. I wasn't intoxicated, although my passenger was a bit buzzed if I remember correctly. I've also never experienced anything out of the ordinary in my entire life other than this. Has anyone heard of something similar before? Story 3. I think I might have shared this already, but I need to go more into detail with what happened. About 6-8 years ago, my friend Giovanni and I left my house to go get some late-night McDonald's. You know, just as young fellas do at 2 a.m. after a night of partying, etc. We got into his white Mustang, left the neighborhood, and began driving on one of the main roads towards McDonald's, which was about 2 miles away. As we cross an intersection just about half a mile away from McDonald's, we get slammed by another car and thrown, and we proceed to roll. All I remember from the impact is that the car was speeding very fast, the impact was brutal, glass shards flew everywhere, and the sound of plastic and metal scraping the asphalt. We died upon impact. We were gone, then it all just went black. I saw that the car was annihilated looking at it from above. The scene was distressing. Then just as soon as the scene played out of our deaths, it abruptly ended, and we automatically went back, and we were both standing at the front door about to leave to McDonald's. I look over at Gio, and Gio is tearing up and shaking with his hand on the doorknob. I say, "Bro, what the fuck was that? If we leave and go right now, we're going to die in a car crash." All he replied with was something along the lines of, "I know." Gio was shaking terribly, and I felt sick to my stomach. We had both just lived out our deaths. We both stepped away from the door and walked back into my family room and sat on the couch and didn't say a word to each other and just stared off into the distance. I had lived my own death, and so did he. We both knew it, and we both had no idea how to explain it. The best way I can explain it is it felt like a dream where it's one of those almost too real of a dreams. We assuredly left the house and almost made it to McDonald's, but we got hit at an intersection then flashed back almost immediately to my house. If y'all have seen the episode of Rick and Morty where Morty gets a do-over control, it was exactly like that. It's like we experienced and lived our deaths, then simply had a do-over and respawned to 10 to 15 minutes earlier. Story 4. About 5 years ago in January, I was planning to overdose. I have struggled with suicidal thoughts most of my life, and things were just extremely bad at the time. I'd like to note I wasn't in distress that night. It was something I had decided a few days before. It wasn't a sudden decision on a moment's notice. I have a history of mental illness, clearly, but not psychosis. I've never experienced something like this in all my breakdowns. That night I decided to scroll through Facebook while waiting for my family to go to sleep. I saw a GoFundMe post shared by a friend and read it. It was to raise money for a little boy, whose mother and father had both died by suicide very recently, father first, mother a week later. It included a screenshot of a post from the mother talking about why she did what she did, grief over loss of husband, what she wanted for her son and her pets after her death, and that she was sorry. I found that post and read literally hundreds of comments from friends and family telling her not to, and then updates from the family that she had. I remember reading at least 2 news articles connected to this woman and her husband's deaths. I remember reading both obituaries and the update about their son being in the care of his grandparents, what the mother asked for in her post. I remember the husband was a firefighter, and the fire company he worked for raised a lot of money for their son. All this made me realize I couldn't do that to my own friends and family, so I ended up waking up my parents and going to the hospital. When I got out, I tried to find this information again. I had thought of donating to the GoFundMe in thanks for saving my life. I have never been able to find anything. The GoFundMe post I originally saw from my Facebook friend wasn't there. Neither were the news articles or obituaries. Nothing on either the woman or her husband. I remember their names because the woman is my own first name, and the husband is my dad's name. Didn't have common last name either. I don't know what happened, but I do hope that somehow the families I read about, the kid, their friends, didn't lose anyone. And I am grateful for seeing that post that night, no matter what happened or where it all went. I just can't understand how it could all disappear like that. It's the internet. Things last forever here. Story 5. In 2017, I was going to college in Seattle. The city is fairly far away from my hometown of Ventura, California. One night in December, I woke up out of a dead sleep with tears running down my face and an extreme sense of dread and helplessness that, to my recollection, I cried for a few good minutes and then instantly fell back to sleep. In the morning, I woke up to many phone calls and voicemails from my mother who told me that a fire, Thomas Fire, had ripped through the hills and the neighborhoods that were developed on them and many other parts of the county. My family had to evacuate in the middle of the night. Of course, I could have no idea that this had happened in the middle of the night, as I did not check my phone and was not contacted by my parents or brother at any point either. I remember feeling so struck by the idea that in some way I must have known this was happening and felt so strongly that I woke up crying right about the time my family was forced to leave our house. Till this day, I still get chills about it. Even just typing this all out made me tear up a bit. Not sure what it all meant, but it was, and still kinda is, disturbing. Story 6. My husband was married before he met me and had a daughter. One day, my husband was preparing to go home from work when he said he felt like someone hit him full force in the stomach. He couldn't get his breath and had to immediately sit down. His co-workers, he worked in a factory, saw that he was in distress and came over to help him. They thought he was having a heart attack, as he was completely ashen and unable to stand or speak. Then as quickly as it happened, it was over. He recovered and finished his job before clocking out. When he got home and saw a sheriff's car outside his house, he knew something was wrong. As it turned out, his daughter, 13 years old at the time, had had a terrible accident. She was messing around railroad cars in a train yard with some friends. On a dare, she climbed up to the top of the cars, which had not been moving at all. What she and her friends didn't know was that the cars could be moved remotely from a station house out of sight of the cars. The train workers were supposed to check the yard thoroughly before moving the cars, but they didn't this time. She lost her balance on top of the car as it began to move and fell to the tracks, where the train ran over her. According to the train yard workers who heard her scream, her friends ran away in fear. She lived about 10 minutes before she passed on. The train car had cut her in two just below her diaphragm, so she could breathe and even speak in those 10 minutes. She was thinking of her dad, my husband, because she told one of the workers, "My dad's gonna kill me for coming here," just before she died. That was about the time my husband, who by his own admission doesn't believe in things beyond logic, felt like someone hit or kicked him in his stomach, just about where his daughter received her fatal wound. He's never before or since had such an experience. Story 7. My dog was sick, and the only vet was 2 hours' drive from my house in the mountains, so I had to leave him overnight. The vet assured me he would be okay and not to worry. I went home to bed around 4 a.m. I woke up and saw my dog at the foot of my bed just staring at me. I jumped out of bed and he was gone. I immediately called the veterinary office. It was a 24-hour vet. When the night shift girl answered, I said, "My dog is dead, I just saw him." She asked me my dog's name, then told me she had just checked his kennel 30 minutes ago and he was fine. I asked her to check again. She came back to the phone a few minutes later and said, "You're right, he's dead." Story 8. About 2 years ago, I was dating a girl who lived 30 minutes west of me. To get to her house and back to mine, I had to travel on a single two-lane country road. Like most country roads, they're often abandoned past a certain time, and the only things you typically see are deers or coyotes running across the road. I would stay at my girlfriend's house until 2 a.m. or later, and then I would hop on the road and drive home. At this point, I probably drove home from her house over 50 to 60 times, so I got a feel for the road and the accompanied drive. I knew where cops sometimes sat, or the typical place deers would cross. This road had no stop signs but had intersecting roads, so I got used to dropping my speed dramatically whenever I got close to the roads. The only time I didn't drop my speed was when I approached traffic lights, since usually people take these more seriously than stop signs. The forest, cornfields, and the expectation you're alone on the road can easily create a car accident if you're not paying attention, which is why I slowed down at the other intersections. The only stoplight was close to my home and turned the 2-lane country road into a divided 6-lane road. There were 2 lanes on one side and 4 on the other side for turning left, turning right, and 2 main lanes. As I approached this light at around 3 a.m., I saw a car probably about a mile ahead sitting at the green light. I'm assuming the lights operated on sensors since this light was green all the time. At half a mile away, I started to get an eerie feeling because the car was still sitting there. I rarely ever see any other car on the road, especially this late, and people who are on the road are hurrying home. I have no idea why, but I started to slow down and stay in the lane behind the car. On any other night, I definitely would have switched to the other lane and just cruised through the light at reduced speeds. As I pulled behind the car, who had now been sitting at the green light for about a few minutes, something felt very off, and almost instinctively, I just stopped dead in my tracks right behind the car. From my car, all I could see is someone in the driver's seat sitting straight up. It felt like I sat there for an eternity, but in reality, it was only several seconds. Almost as soon as my car comes to a complete stop, a 18-wheeler with a trailer barrels through the intersection, running the red light. The speed limit on both roads was 60, and the intersection was blocked by brush, so in a second the truck appeared, and just as fast it disappeared. The light never changed for either sides or indicated that a car was coming. I'm assuming the truck driver probably thought the roads were empty at this time of night, so he gave no FS. However, the weirdest part was that as soon as the truck passed through the intersection, the car in front of me immediately switched lanes and took a left turn. In almost a blink, the car went from stopped still to turning away. I was in lucid state of shock and disbelief at what had just occurred and just sat at the green light. I know if I had driven around that car at the pace I usually go, I would have been T-boned without ever seeing it coming. There's no doubt about it, but something that night compelled me to act abnormal, and it saved my life. To this day, I still have dreams about this interaction, because it is one of a few situations where there is no logical explanations for why I acted the way I did suddenly, and it ended up saving me. Story 9. So 2 years ago, I went on vacation to Spain. It was a package tour for teens. I befriended a guy and a girl there, who were a few rooms away from me in the hotel. Since we were over 18, we were allowed to hang out alone outside of the hotel, and so we practically spent the whole trip just walking around town and drinking together. I clearly remember adding the girl, let's name her X, on Facebook and talking to her on Messenger, since that's how the three of us were planning our days. I even started a group conversation with X and that boy, let's name him Y. Fast forward to today, it was her birthday, so I wanted to wish her happy birthday on Messenger, and she just wasn't in my contacts. I thought maybe she unfriended me because of my copious amount of shitpost. But looking her up on Facebook didn't bring up anything. I decided to ask whether he'd heard from her recently, and he said he never met that girl. I looked through all the people me and X both added on FB during our trip, and even asked some of them about her. Nobody seems to recall meeting X. Y claims we were hanging out with another girl, who I do know and spoke to on the trip, but never hung out with. I don't know what to make of it, and I'm kind of freaking out. I'm thinking maybe my mental health is much worse than I thought. But honestly, there's a huge difference between mild seasonal depression and hallucinating a person for 2 weeks straight. Story 10. Yesterday I decided to drive to the mall. The one I go to is massive. It's circular, you can drive around it. It has a massive car park on one side. So all seems normal on my way to the Malv with my girlfriend, who is still in shock as am I. TBH, we haven't really spoke about it since. So as we get there it looks really quiet, there's about 10 cars there. So I'm questioning whether or not it's open, which is really weird. So we drive around the other side just to see what is going on, and there's a few people about and a few cars but nothing. So we decided to go round back to the first side where we normally park, and our plan is to walk to the entrance and see what's up. This is where it gets weird. As we pull up around to the other side again, the whole CAR park is full. There's literally people walking about everywhere. People sat outside having coffee. There was even 2 ambulances. So very, very weird. Me and my girlfriend were unbelievably shocked. We were speechless. We literally sat in the car for 10 minutes just trying to get our heads around it, and I haven't felt right since TBH. The time difference for driving round was about 2 minutes. It would have been physically impossible for all them cars and people to get there and all be empty. What happened? I would love to hear your thoughts. It might help me feel like I've gone a bit crazy. Story 11. I was encouraged to share my story here after making a TikTok about the event. About 20 years ago, my best friend and myself went to Ridgecrest, California for a party. The party ended up being a 50th wedding anniversary, and we were improperly dressed for it. We ate at the banquet hall, left to the home of my friend's cousin. We left a short time later, headed back to Bakersfield. I was sitting in the driver's seat, she was in the passenger seat, and we began to enter the freeway on-ramp. That was the last memory either of us had until 4 hours later. I kind of woke up, but I didn't feel like I was sleeping. I more or less became aware of our surroundings, and that I was in the passenger seat. I looked over at my friend, and her eyes were staring into the dark distance. Quickly I realized we had somehow ended up on a dirt road. I yelled her name. She kind of snapped back to reality. There was a chain-link fence along the driver's side of the car with barbed wire on top. The road was graded, but the surrounding field was not. For some reason we were going 30 or 40 miles per hour down this dirt road, and we start freaking out. Almost immediately we drove right up to a white sign about 20 by 30. It had large red and black letters. The top portion read, "Warning." The bottom, "Active landmine field." I screamed for us to turn around, and my friend hit a U-turn in the dirt as we both screamed at the top of our lungs. By this point we are both in a full panic. We have no idea where we are, how this happened, where we are going, but we are moving. She's driving 50 to 60 miles per hour in the Tahoe, headed the opposite direction. We traveled maybe 2 minutes max. Suddenly we see lights from every direction approaching, just as fast as we are running, if not faster. When they got within 100 yards or so, they turned on their sirens, and we realized it was the police. Military police. We have somehow ended up deep inside of a military base. They came driving through ungraded desert to stop us. We were removed from the vehicle, two 20-something girls in party clothes sobbing. The MPs asked us how we got there. They asked what gate we had come in. They kept us in the desert for hours. My friend was put into the back of an MP car for a good portion of it, while I sat in the dirt leaned against the fence. They ran our names, discovered my friend had someone write a bad on her account a few counties away, and nothing else. We were questioned, and finally after 4 hours we were released. They escorted us out of a gate. We realized we were now on the north side of the city, when we had left originally from her cousins on the south side of Ridgecrest. We went home, told maybe 5 or 6 people who all either assumed we were crazy or lying. We stopped telling it until recently I told my fiancé. Then I made a TikTok which way more people watched than I expected, and here I am. We were not on any type of psychedelic drugs. We both share the same memory, including the time lapse. If I was alone in the car, I would have thought it was a dream. It was the scariest experience of my life. Story 12. Okay, I'm still confused about this. First, some background information for context. I'm 28 years old. 2 days ago, I was sitting on the couch with my girlfriend, for 10 years, and her best friend, F. We went to some same high school, so we were talking about memories and classmates from that time. Like what happened with them, career-wise, love life, etc. So we started talking about my ex-girlfriend. She was friends with my GF's best friend. Suddenly I remembered ex-GF's cousin, 27 years old ATM, whom had a short fling with GF's best friend at that time. I had this strange feeling of dread, like, oh damn, I forgot he passed away like 6 years ago. So before I started talking about him, I looked him up on Facebook. Turns out he's alive and kicking, thank God. So my brain made a mistake, but for the good. He looks happy, has a boyfriend now, and he's alive. So I start laughing and told my GF and her friend, wow, I had this weird feeling that guy's name had died, but I'm so glad I was wrong. So my girlfriend looks at me with shock and says, no, you're not wrong. He died years ago. So I'm flabbergasted. I show my GF his Facebook page, with an update or photo uploaded every month for the past years. And recent stuff not in memory off. Her jaw drops to the floor. GF's best friend doesn't really react to it, not confirming nor denying it. So my girlfriend says, I remember his Facebook said in memory of, he was passed away due to illness, and friends and family replied with grief and sadness. We were at your mom's house when we found out. My brother's name and her brother's name were there too. Call them and ask if they remember. So I called my brother first. Hey bro, do you remember guy's name? He replied, yes sure, that tall cousin of ex-GF. What's up with him? So I answered his question with a question. Do you remember something weird about him? You mean that he died a few years ago? I lost my shit. Told my brother he was still alive, and my brother was very sure it happened. I even came with the suggestion that maybe we got 2 guys mixed up. My brother said, nope, 100% sure it's him. Would be a crazy coincidence if we all had the same mind screwing going on, right? He was right. So I called my GF's brother, my best friend. Do you remember guy's name? So he replied, yeah, of course, the giant. So I said, remember something odd about him? He replied, yeah, I remember it turned out he was attracted to men. So I said, oh okay, that's it. And he died a few years back. Cancer, right? He added. So I said, surprise. He didn't. Best friend starts to laugh manically. Yeah, he did. But he didn't. So my GF, my brother, my best friend, and I can all recall the moment we found out. My best friend suggested that maybe it was some kind of sick joke. But we all remember that his family replied on his Facebook with great sadness. Or maybe it was some kind of symbolic death, that he was reborn. But it didn't make sense. He already came out before this news, and again, friends and family replied with grief. Okay, here comes the second twist. Coincidence or not, this whole situation took place in 1 hour. So I go back on Facebook, see a message that someone else died that I knew from back then. Young guy, 27 years old. Passed away about an hour ago. Like stories and signals got mixed up. I can't wrap my head around this whole situation. Seriously, what happened? Story 13. I've been on a bit of a binge of these stories, and it made me wonder if I had experienced anything like this, and I thought back and realized I have, although not as freaky or crazy as most. I'm quite a skeptical person, but this always has me at a loss. My girlfriend's family lives a little ways away, and so often I'll drive us over to visit with them. Without fail, and I mean every time. When we leave back home, and for some reason only when we leave the town to head back home, this man is out walking his dog at the exact same position. Now sure, it could of course just be his routine, and I'm just having a timing coincidence, right? Nah, we're talking it could be 3 p.m., or it could be 11 p.m., and he's still always cutting the corner exactly when we pass, as if he's spawning in. It's so odd. It's like seeing it replayed over and over, and always so consistent. We always mention it on the way back and check, and without fail he's there. I play a lot of games, and I swear to you, if this was happening in a game, I'd be complaining about the lack of NPC variety El Mayo. One of these days I'm going to just be brave and pull over, and just politely ask how frequently he walks his dog. Who knows? Maybe he's thinking, damn, every time I be walking my dog that white car passes. Story 14. Back in the early 2000s, I remember vividly my mom telling me that my cousin Jay had shot and killed himself. I remember it being a big deal because he had a few kids, and they were concerned if the mothers would still let my aunt and uncle see them. He has 3 baby mamas. We all talked about how bad we felt for his kids. Fast forward to a year ago. I got a call from my mom. She starts telling me all about how Jay was engaged and getting married. She wanted to take my kids to get a dress. I was so confused. I kept thinking to myself, I thought he died. I just kind of went with it, so I didn't sound like a complete jerk and delusional. But I was going through some mental confusion badly. I remember he died. After that call, all of the sudden Jay is around all of the time. At family gatherings, etc. I never said anything to anyone, but I have been horribly weirded out by this memory. He hasn't been around at all since I remember he died. I hadn't seen him or heard his name for 15 or more years. All of the sudden, he is just there. Alive. I seem to be the only one who is confused. I finally said something to my mom last night after reading stories here, and deciding I should see if anyone else has this memory. She had no idea what I was talking about, and now probably thinks her daughter is losing her mind. This is really bothering me, and I can't understand why I have this memory, and he is just around now. It is very creepy to me. Story 15. I was riding the bus from God knows where to wherever the frig, and found a lanyard with keys on the floor. I was the only one on the bus, and we were in motion when I saw the keys, so there was no one to shout after or chase to find the rightful owner of these lost keys. As I looked at the keys, I noticed a store card for TIS, the Illini store, which was one of the bookstores on campus. I had one of those cards myself, and I remembered giving my name when I signed up for the card. I took a shot in the dark and got off the bus by the quad. I walked down to 6th Street and went to TIS to see if I could get the name associated with the card. I fed the store clerk a load of bullshit and got the name. I didn't recognize the name at all, but I had an idea. I went back to my dorm room at Far Florida Avenue residence in the Aljesby building. I walked up to the 3rd floor and went to my room. I sat at my computer and logged into Facebook and typed in the name. Sure enough, the dude popped right up. This was in the early days of Facebook, when people would post a lot of information about themselves on their profiles. This was also before you could privatize your profile. As was the style at the time, his address and room number were posted. He lived on the 5th floor of Oglesby. What a convenience. I hoofed it up a couple flights of stairs and walked to his room. I knocked on the door and waited. No answer. I knocked again. No answer. I jiggled the knob and it was unlocked, so I cracked the door and said hello. No answer. I opened the door more and noticed some guy napping on one of the 2 beds in there. I tossed the keys on the desk, closed the door, and walked away. Back to my room I went. I can only imagine that this dude came back to his room pissed that he lost his keys. Also pissed that he'd have to pay to get his room rekeyed, as was the policy for losing your dorm room keys, and it was $50. Ask how I know. How confused and freaked out was he when his keys were on his desk? Maybe he was the dude napping on the bed. No one saw me drop off the keys, and there wasn't an easily conceivable way to identify the owner of the keys, let alone where the owner lived, and least of all having keycard access to the building. I was the glitch in this guy's matrix.